A veterinarian rescues a chained dog, but when the owner finds out, he does something terrible. Emily Carter wiped the sweat from her brow as she finished her last appointment of the day. The Georgia summer heat was particularly brutal this year, and her small veterinary clinic in Millbrook wasn't exactly equipped with state-of-the-art air conditioning. Still, she wouldn't have it any other way. This clinic, housed in a converted Victorian home on the outskirts of town, had been her dream for the past 15 years. At 38, Emily had built a reputation as one of the most caring veterinarians in Cherokee County. Her gentle demeanor with animals and unwavering dedication to their welfare had earned her the trust of local pet owners and rescue organizations alike. The walls of her office were adorned with photos of successful recoveries, dogs, cats, and even a few exotic pets she'd helped save over the years. It was just past 7 in the evening when her receptionist, Maria, knocked on her office door. "Dr. Carter? There's an anonymous call you might want to take." Emily's heart sank. Anonymous calls usually meant one thing: animal abuse. She'd handled dozens of such cases over the years, each leaving its mark on her soul. "Put it through, please." The voice on the other end was trembling, clearly disguising itself. "There's a Rottweiler. He's been chained up for months. No food, no water, just a chain. Please, you have to help him." The caller provided an address on the outskirts of town, in an area Emily knew was riddled with poverty and crime. "Can you tell me more about the situation?" Emily asked, but the line had already gone dead. She sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. The responsible thing would be to call animal control, file a report, and let the proper authorities handle it. But Emily knew all too well how these cases often played out: bureaucratic delays, insufficient evidence, or worse, warnings that gave abusive owners time to hide their crimes. "Maria," she called out, "cancel my morning appointments tomorrow. Something's come up." That night, Emily could barely sleep. Her mind kept wandering to the Rottweiler, imagining its suffering. Her own dog, a rescued golden retriever named Sophie, sensed her distress and curled up closer to her on the bed. Emily ran her fingers through Sophie's fur, remembering the day she'd found her abandoned by the highway 5 years ago. At dawn, Emily drove to the address she'd been given. The neighborhood was even worse than she'd imagined. Abandoned cars littered the streets, and many houses had boarded up windows. She parked her car a block away and walked the rest of the distance, her heart pounding with each step. The house at 1247 Maple Street was a dilapidated single-story structure with peeling paint and a yard overgrown with weeds. And there, in the furthest corner of the property, she saw him, the Rottweiler. Emily's breath caught in her throat. In 15 years of veterinary practice, she'd seen her share of abuse cases. But this was different. The dog was essentially a skeleton with fur, his ribs protruding sharply against his dull, matted coat. A heavy chain, far too large for even a healthy dog his size, was wrapped around his neck, the metal having worn away the fur and left raw, infected skin underneath. What struck Emily most weren't the physical wounds, though they were severe. It was the dog's eyes. They held a depth of suffering that made her chest tighten, yet somehow, there was still a spark of life in them. She approached slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay. I'm here to help." The Rottweiler's tail gave the faintest wag, and he attempted to lift his head. Even that small movement seemed to cost him tremendous effort. Emily's professional assessment kicked in. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infected wounds from the chain, possible heartworm infection given the lack of care. But he was alive, and where there was life, there was hope. She reached into her bag for water and some soft food she'd brought, placing them within the dog's reach. He didn't lunge for it as many starving dogs would. Instead, he looked at her first, as if asking permission. That simple gesture told Emily volumes about his inherent gentleness. "Go ahead, sweetheart. It's all yours." As the dog ate and drank with careful, measured movements, Emily examined the chain. It was secured with a heavy padlock to a stake driven deep into the ground. This wasn't a temporary situation. This dog had been imprisoned here for a long time. She was so focused on the dog that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell over her. The smell hit her first, a nauseating mixture of stale alcohol and unwashed clothes. What the hell do you think you're doing on my property? Emily turned slowly to face a man who could only be the dog's owner. Jake Miller was in his early 40s, though hard living had aged him considerably. His face was weathered, with several days' worth of stubble and bloodshot eyes that spoke of a recent drinking binge. "I'm Dr. Emily Carter, a veterinarian," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I received a call about a dog in distress." "Rex ain't in distress," Jake spat. "He's my property, and you're trespassing. Get out before I call the cops." Emily stood her ground, though her heart was racing. "Sir, this dog needs immediate medical attention. The condition he's in, it's criminal neglect. Please, let me help him. I have a clinic." "Help him?" Jake's laugh was harsh. "Like those other do-gooders helped Ranger? No thanks, lady. Now get off my property before I make you." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Emily knew she should leave, call the authorities, do things the proper way. But as she looked back at the Rottweiler, Rex, something in her snapped. She couldn't leave him here. She wouldn't. "I'm not leaving without this dog," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Jake's face darkened. He took a step toward her, fists clenched. "You got 3 seconds." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Despite his weakened state, Rex suddenly found the strength to stand. The sound he made wasn't quite a growl. It was more like a warning rumble deep in his chest. He positioned himself between Emily and Jake, his emaciated body trembling with the effort, but his stance unmistakable. He was protecting her. Jake seemed startled by this display from the dog he'd abused for so long. He took a step back, confusion briefly replacing anger on his face. Emily seized the moment. She had bolt cutters in her bag, brought for exactly this purpose, and in one swift motion, she cut through the chain near Rex's neck. "Come on, boy," she whispered urgently. To her amazement and relief, Rex understood. He stayed close to her side as they made their way toward the street, his movements slow but determined. Behind them, Jake had recovered from his surprise. "You're making a big mistake," he shouted. "I'll find you. You hear me? I'll get him back." Emily didn't stop until they reached her car. She helped Rex into the back seat, her hands shaking as she started the engine. In the rearview mirror, she could see Jake standing in his yard, filming her car with his phone. He was smiling now, and somehow that was more terrifying than his anger. The drive to her clinic was tense. Emily kept checking her mirrors, half expecting to see Jake's truck pursuing them. Rex lay quietly in the back seat, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that brought tears to her eyes. "It's okay, boy," she kept saying, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to reassure, Rex or herself. "You're safe now. I promise." At the clinic, Maria's eyes widened as Emily rushed in with Rex. "Oh my God, Dr. Carter, what happened?" "No time to explain. Call Dr. Rodriguez. I need his help." Dr. Rodriguez was a colleague who specialized in emergency veterinary medicine. And Maria, what I did wasn't exactly legal. If anyone asks, Rex was brought in as a stray. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Rodriguez arrived quickly, and together they worked to stabilize Rex. The detailed examination revealed the full extent of his suffering: severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple infected wounds, heartworm disease, and evidence of old fractures that had healed poorly. "He's lucky to be alive," Dr. Rodriguez said as they reviewed Rex's blood work. "The chain around his neck? Those wounds are infected. Much longer, and he could have developed sepsis." Emily nodded grimly. "He needs surgery to clean those wounds properly. And look at these old breaks. His left hind leg, 3 ribs. These weren't accidents." "Emily," Dr. Rodriguez's voice was gentle but concerned, "what exactly happened today?" "The truth." She told him everything. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know this could cost you your license," he said finally. "What you did was theft, technically speaking, no matter how justified." "I know," Emily replied, watching Rex sleep peacefully under sedation. "But looking at him now, I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The next morning, Emily arrived at her clinic early to check on Rex. She found him alert and already showing signs of improvement, though she knew his recovery would be a long journey. What she didn't expect to find was 2 police officers waiting in her office. "Dr. Carter?" One of them stepped forward. "I'm Officer Bennett. We need to talk about a complaint filed by Jake Miller regarding the theft of his dog." Emily's heart sank, but she wasn't surprised. She'd known there would be consequences. What she hadn't expected was the support that emerged in the following days. The local news picked up the story, and soon it went viral. Photos of Rex's condition sparked outrage on social media. While some criticized Emily for taking the law into her own hands, many more praised her courage. Former clients came forward with character references, and local animal rights organizations rallied to her defense. Emily's lawyer, Sarah Goldberg, proved to be a godsend. A former prosecutor who now specialized in animal welfare cases, Sarah saw something in the case that others had missed. Jake Miller's name rang a bell, she told Emily during their first meeting. "I did some digging. 10 years ago, he was investigated in connection with a dogfighting ring, but charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. And Rex's injuries, some of those old breaks are consistent with dogfighting." This information led to a deeper investigation. Sarah worked with local law enforcement to build a case, and gradually, a disturbing pattern emerged. Jake wasn't just an abusive owner. He was part of a larger network of illegal dogfighting operations across several counties. The police needed evidence, however, and that's where Emily found herself facing a difficult choice. They wanted her to help with an undercover operation. "It's dangerous," Officer Bennett warned. "Miller's already hostile toward you. But if you could approach him, pretend you want to make amends, maybe express interest in the dogfighting world." Emily's first instinct was to refuse. But then she thought of Rex, of all the other dogs who might be suffering similar fates. "I'll do it," she said. The operation was carefully planned. Emily would approach Jake at a local bar he frequented, claiming she felt guilty about taking Rex and wanted to understand his world better. She wore a wire, and undercover officers were always nearby. The first meeting was terrifying. Jake was suspicious initially, but Emily had prepared her story carefully. She claimed that treating Rex had opened her eyes to how tough and resilient fighting dogs could be. She expressed interest in learning more, suggesting her veterinary skills could be useful to his business. Over the next few weeks, Jake gradually began to trust her. He revealed bits and pieces of the operation, locations, names, upcoming fights. Each piece of information was carefully documented by the police. But it was during one of these conversations that Emily learned something unexpected about Jake's past. "I used to be like you," he said one night, several drinks in. "Had a dog, Rottweiler named Ranger. Best damn dog you'd ever meet. Raised him from a pup." His voice changed as he spoke about Ranger, becoming softer, almost vulnerable. "Some guys stole him. Found out later they forced him into fighting. By the time I tracked him down," Jake's hands tightened around his glass. "He wasn't my Ranger anymore. They turned him into something else. Something violent." Emily realized then that Jake's cruelty stemmed from his own trauma. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped her understand them. The investigation came to a head during a planned raid on Jake's property. The police had evidence of a major dogfighting event scheduled there. Emily was supposed to attend as part of her cover, but something went wrong. Jake had discovered her deception. Whether someone had tipped him off or he'd figured it out himself wasn't clear. But when Emily arrived at his house that evening, she found him waiting with a gun. "You think I'm stupid?" he snarled, his hands shaking as he pointed the weapon at her. "You're wearing a wire right now, aren't you?" Emily raised her hands slowly. "Jake, please. Think about Ranger. What happened to him was terrible, but what you're doing now, you're becoming the very thing that destroyed him." For a moment, something flickered in Jake's eyes, pain, recognition, maybe even regret. But then his expression hardened again. "Shut up. You don't know anything about?" The police burst in at that moment. In the chaos that followed, Jake fired his gun. The bullet missed Emily by inches, embedding itself in the wall behind her. Within seconds, Jake was disarmed and in custody. The raid revealed more than anyone had expected. In addition to evidence of dogfighting, they found documents linking Jake's operation to similar rings across 3 states. His arrest led to multiple investigations and dozens of dogs being rescued. The legal proceedings that followed were intense. Emily faced charges for her initial theft of Rex, but given the circumstances and the evidence she'd helped uncover, the charges were eventually dropped. Jake and his associates faced multiple felony counts. During Jake's trial, something unexpected happened. When called to testify, he broke down on the stand. He talked about Ranger, about how losing him had broken something inside him, how he'd started drinking, gotten involved with dogfighting as a way to numb his pain, and eventually become the very thing he'd once hated. "I look at Rex now," he said, glancing at Emily, "and I see what Ranger could have been if someone had saved him, what I could have been if I'd made different choices." Jake's testimony, along with his cooperation in identifying other dogfighting operations, led to a slightly reduced sentence. More importantly, it led to a program being established at the local prison where inmates could work with rescued dogs, helping to rehabilitate them while working on their own rehabilitation. As for Rex, his recovery was remarkable. Under Emily's care, he gained weight, his wounds healed, and his gentle nature fully emerged. He became a favorite at the clinic, especially with children. His story inspired Emily to establish a rehabilitation center for abused dogs, with Rex serving as its ambassador. A year after the rescue, Emily received an unexpected letter from prison. It was from Jake. "I know I can never undo what I did," he wrote, "but seeing Rex now, seeing how he's helping other dogs and people, maybe some good can come from all this. Ranger would have liked that." Emily read the letter several times, thinking about the complex chain of events that had led to this moment. She looked out her office window to where Rex was playing in the clinic's yard with a group of children from a local school, part of a program she'd started to teach kids about animal care and empathy. Rex caught her eye and wagged his tail, his dark eyes now filled with joy instead of suffering. He was living proof that even in the darkest situations, there was always hope for healing and transformation. Emily had risked everything to save one dog, but in doing so, she'd sparked a chain of events that led to many more being saved. The rehabilitation center she'd established was now a model for similar programs across the country. And while the memory of that first confrontation with Jake still gave her nightmares sometimes, she knew she'd make the same choice again. Because sometimes, she learned, doing the right thing meant taking risks. Sometimes it meant facing your fears and standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And sometimes, in trying to save others, you end up saving yourself as well. Rex continued his work as an ambassador for abused animals, his gentle nature helping to heal not just other dogs, but the people who came to the rehabilitation center as well. His story became a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and second chances, not just for animals, but for humans too. And every now and then, when Emily watched him playing freely in the sunshine, she thought about how a single act of courage could ripple outward, touching and transforming lives in ways she never could have imagined. It reminded her that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope for healing, redemption, and transformation. 5 years after Rex's rescue, Emily's rehabilitation center had grown into a full-fledged sanctuary. The Second Chance Animal Rehabilitation Center, as it was now known, sprawled across 15 acres just outside Millbrook. What had started as a small operation working with a handful of abused dogs had evolved into a comprehensive facility that helped hundreds of animals each year. Rex, now a distinguished senior dog with touches of gray around his muzzle, remained the heart and soul of the center. His story had been featured in national media, and people came from all over the country to meet the brave Rottweiler who had not only survived abuse, but had helped change the lives of so many others. One autumn morning, Emily received an unexpected phone call from the state prison. "Dr. Carter?" The prison administrator's voice was professional but warm. "Jake Miller is being released next week. He's completed his sentence and shown exemplary behavior, particularly in our inmate dog training program. He asked if he could visit your center." Emily sat in silence for a moment, her hand absently stroking Rex's head as he lay beside her desk. The dog had somehow sensed the significance of the call and pressed closer to her leg. "What do you think, boy?" she whispered to Rex after hanging up. "Should we give him a chance?" Rex's tail thumped against the floor, his usual response to Emily's questions. She'd learned to trust his judgment over the years. Dogs, she'd found, often saw things in people that humans missed. The day Jake arrived at the center was crisp and clear. He looked different from the angry, alcohol-ravaged man she'd confronted years ago. Prison had aged him, but there was also a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for letting me come," he said quietly. His hands were trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure you would." Emily led him through the facility, showing him the rehabilitation areas, the veterinary clinic, and the educational center where school groups came to learn about animal welfare. Jake was quiet, taking everything in with an expression that mixed wonder and regret. Then they reached the main play yard, where Rex was supervising a group of recovering dogs. The moment he saw Jake, Rex's ears perked up. Emily held her breath, watching as the Rottweiler slowly approached his former owner. What happened next brought tears to her eyes. Rex, who had every reason to fear or hate this man, gently nuzzled Jake's hand. Jake sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the dog's capacity for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." That moment became a turning point. Jake asked if he could volunteer at the center, using the dog training skills he'd learned in prison. Emily was hesitant at first, but Rex's acceptance of Jake helped her make the decision. Jake started coming to the center 3 times a week. He worked particularly well with the most traumatized dogs, perhaps because he understood their pain in a way others couldn't. His experience with dogfighting, though tragic, gave him unique insights into helping these animals recover. Word of Jake's transformation spread through the community. While some were skeptical, most were moved by his genuine efforts to make amends. He spoke at schools and community groups about animal abuse, using his own story as a cautionary tale. A year after his release, Jake approached Emily with an idea. He wanted to start a program specifically focused on preventing young people from getting involved in dogfighting. He had seen how poverty and lack of opportunities had led many down that path, just as it had led him. "These kids," he explained, "they're looking for something, belonging, respect, maybe just a way to make money. If we can reach them early, show them there's another way." Emily agreed, and together they developed the Guardians program. It paired at-risk youth with rehabilitated dogs, teaching them about responsible pet ownership, animal behavior, and basic veterinary care. The program quickly gained support from local schools and law enforcement. Rex played a special role in the program. Despite his advancing age, he seemed to have a particular gift for connecting with troubled teens. One boy, in particular, reminded Emily of a younger Jake, angry, defensive, already starting to drift toward the wrong crowd. "I used to be like you," Jake told the boy one day, as they watched Rex demonstrating his gentle leadership with a group of younger dogs. "I thought being tough meant being cruel, but real strength? Real strength is what Rex has the ability to forgive, to stay gentle even after everything he's been through." The impact of their work began to show in concrete ways. Reports of dogfighting in the region decreased significantly. More importantly, they were seeing changes in attitudes, especially among young people. The cycle of violence that had trapped Jake was being broken, one child at a time. As Rex entered his senior years, Emily often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all to this point. What had started as a desperate rescue attempt had grown into something far more significant, a movement for change, a story of redemption, and a testament to the healing power of compassion. One evening, as she was closing up the center, Emily found Jake sitting with Rex in the quiet of the sunset. The old dog's head was resting on Jake's lap, both of them seeming perfectly at peace. "Sometimes I think about Ranger," Jake said softly, not looking up, "about how I let my pain over losing him turn me into someone who could hurt other animals. But then I look at Rex, at what he's helped create here. Maybe this is how I finally honor Ranger's memory." Emily nodded, understanding that healing rarely followed a straight path. Sometimes it took unexpected turns, brought together unlikely allies, and revealed strength in the most unexpected places. Rex lived to be 11 years old, far longer than anyone had expected given his early trauma. In his final years, he remained active in the center's programs, though he spent more time napping in sunny spots and accepting gentle pets from visitors. When he finally passed, surrounded by love and comfort, his legacy was already secure. The center created a memorial garden in Rex's honor with a simple plaque that read, "In memory of Rex, who taught us that love is stronger than fear, and that it's never too late for a new beginning." Today, the Second Chance Animal Rehabilitation Center continues its work, guided by the principles that Rex's story embodied. Emily and Jake still work together, their unlikely partnership a powerful reminder that transformation is possible for anyone willing to open their heart to change. Rex's story lives on, not just as a tale of rescue and rehabilitation, but as a beacon of hope for all those who believe in second chances. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is always a path toward light, if we have the courage to take that first step.